Have you ever felt like you were being watched, even when everything around you was completely silent? Have you ever woken up in the middle of the night sensing a cold gaze staring at you from the darkness? There are things that exist in the space between reality and illusion, forces that, once touched, will never let you go. We thought it was just coincidence, a cruel joke of fate, but no, everything had been set in motion long before we realized it. An ancient curse had quietly clung to us, and what's hunting us now doesn't belong to this world. You might think this is just a story, a meaningless warning meant to scare you, but if you choose to keep listening, if you step into this world, remember this. Once the door is opened, there is no way back. Now, be ready. The story begins. We were cursed and hunted.
I never smoke. Well, at least, not until this moment. It seemed fitting for the time. I don't know how much time I have left. You see smoking to relieve stress and anxiety in the movies. Considering Kyle won't need them, I figured, what the hell? The Bic probably only had enough left for one more light. It's been years since I was this alone. No friends, no food, no water. I don't think I'm going to survive much longer. I wish I had a signal so I'd be able to tell my family goodbye. Tell my girlfriend, Naomi, I love her, and that it'll be okay. I wish I could talk to Kyle's family. The same for Pat and Aaron's. Unfortunately for us all, no one will know of what happened to us. I'll be lucky if this shows up anywhere. If anyone does find it, I don't know if anyone would believe it. But here goes nothing. It was spring break. Pat had a rich uncle who had a house in Belize. San Pedro, to be exact. This place was nice. We joked that Pat's uncle was running drugs for El Chapo to afford it. But really, he was just a successful stockbroker, and a really good one. Anyway, he let us use the house since he wouldn't be around. We were all seniors at Columbia, and a long break was needed. I mean, even as a history major, I was under a ton of pressure. We took the offer. Pat and his girlfriend Megan, Aaron and his girlfriend Jamie, and Kyle went by himself because, well, Kyle had the highest sex drive of anyone I knew. I, of course, brought Naomi. We all looked forward to cutting loose. San Pedro was beautiful. Pat had a friend, Juan Luis, who knew the best spots for us to go. Plus, his uncle kept a lot of liquor at the house, and not the cheap kind of stuff either. I'm talking the guy had an open bottle of Johnny Walker Blue with 2 unopened on backup. Anyways, one of the things to do was fishing. Belize, among other things, was known for its fishing. Not just any fishing, sports fishing. Granted, it was March and the most common fish were not the exciting kind, but there were still good chances at marlin and sailfish. On Thursday, our third day in Belize, the boys went fishing. Juan Luis had a sport fishing yacht and offered to take us. The idea was the girls could spend the day together, while we would use the day to get sun, fish, and to drink beer. Kyle would brag without sickening our girlfriends, and the rest of us could just talk about things the girls don't care about. The plan was to be out most of the day, leave at 8, come back at 5, standard fishing trip. None of us caught anything like this before, and excitement filled the boat. We brought a cooler full of beer, Modelo, Dos Equis, Blue Moon, and Miller Lite. We brought sandwiches and snacks as well. And when we set sail, everything seemed to be fine. The sky was clear, allowing for a beautiful red sunrise to wake us up. Around 9, Juan Luis let us sit in the ocean. We were pretty far offshore. We could see San Pedro, but not much else. Lines dropped, bottles cracked, and it was smooth sailing. Aaron sat down wearing his life vest, completely scared of drowning. We had to beg him to come. He dropped his line and talked about how Jamie wanted to get engaged soon, and his own fears. Sure, he loved the girl, but worried he didn't sleep around as much as a man should. Kyle encouraged a break. Pat and myself told him not to. Now, Aaron grew up the youngest of 6. His brothers were athletes and traditionally masculine. All of them got into state schools on scholarships. Aaron pushed himself academically and earned a scholarship on brain power, much to the disparagement of his father. He was a law major. And while Aaron was telling his story, Pat spotted a visitor, a small shark. It swam towards us, probably for the bait. We got a close look at it. Aaron reeled up, not wanting to lose the bait, and the shark circled and left. Fishing resumed, as did the conversation. Juan Luis moved us further away from shore as there wasn't any sign of marlin, and most catches being wahoos or permits. After stopping with San Pedro being not much more than a dot on the horizon, we continued, and then Pat caught the first marlin. I got the second, and Aaron caught one. Kyle was smoking and chatting about this one cheerleader from campus. The fun was ramping up. Juan Luis moved towards us, wanting to join the fun, but no one saw the rogue wave that hit us. Now, I don't know how waves work, I'll admit that, but a 10-foot wave that appeared out of nowhere on a sunny day did not seem possible. But it happened, and it pushed on us hard. Aaron went overboard. Juan Luis was flung further away. Thankfully, we didn't capsize. But Aaron was pulled aboard by Kyle, the strongest of us. Pat and I held his belt so he could, and then we saw Juan Luis. The current must have grabbed him in the commotion because he was a lot further than where he landed. We watched his hands flail. He screamed, not for help, but in pain. We all watched him go under, and it was a violent pull, like watching a rock getting thrown in, straight down. Sharks. It had to be. We looked over to see. Maybe it was the current, or perhaps it was something else. But there was nothing. And as fast as the chaos started, it was over. But our captain was gone. Calling someone was out of the picture. We probably could have figured out how to steer and get the engine running, but we couldn't navigate. We couldn't even see San Pedro anymore. It took less than 10 minutes, but we were lost. Instantly, ideas were thrown. Pat said, go north, which probably could waste gas. Kyle said, wait, which seemed reasonable. We could drop anchor, but we didn't have service to call, nor did we have a lot of food. The yacht didn't have a stove, so we couldn't boil water. And Aaron said nothing. I couldn't think of anything better, so I sided with Kyle. In the open water, we sat in silence. The beer was gone, and what we didn't drink, we tossed. We put the food inside to keep it out of the sun. There was ice left, which hopefully could have given us some water, but not much. Pat left the cooler open to melt it. Kyle kept smoking. Aaron prayed on his rosary, and we all hoped nothing worse happened. But the open ocean is the perfect humbler. You could be the president, and if you're alone in the ocean, you're no one. Waves don't care about your position. The salt water won't turn fresh because of who you're related to. You are its subject, and it will have its way with you. And as soon as we were put into this mess, it got worse. Storm clouds were suddenly rolling in. Gusts of wind moved us further away. At this point, with no land to reference, any direction seemed like the wrong direction, and we held on for dear life. The rain came down on us, and Pat tried to catch the rainwater. Lightning flashed and the waves crashed. Again, it didn't seem like long that the storm hit us, but we were definitely lost at sea. I thought of Naomi. I laid down on the wet floor and looked at the sky. Something has to happen. And that's when I heard Kyle say the words I never wanted to hear. Sharks are here. The first sharks we saw came in a pair. They were gray. The one closest to us had a hook in its jaw, rusted out. The outside one was bigger, but at least 6 inches wider and 1.5 feet longer than the other. Its face was lighter, almost whiter. Both of them had white tips on their fins. Now, normally I like sharks. Discovery helped with that. But the feature about the USS Indianapolis gave me nightmares. And now, I was living it. They circled, but not attacked. We weren't sinking, so I assumed the sharks were curious. Aaron, either in shock or panic, threw his life raft away from the boat. Threw it as far as he could. It landed an okay distance, enough to get the sharks' attention. I checked my phone. The first contact with the sharks was at 5 o'clock. We were supposed to be back by now, and the girls must have been worried. They had to be. Hopefully Pat told Megan to call someone if we didn't come back, and I prayed that he did. I'm not religious, but I knew that I was meeting God, in the sense of discovery of rebirth, in the sense of an almighty power, in the sense that only through strength one could survive the challenge, like Job or Abraham. They had to prove themselves, and so staying alive was my challenge. Pat divided his sandwich. While not big to begin with, there wasn't much. I ate my sandwich earlier on, around 11:30. Aaron ate his at 1, not long before the wave hit. And none of the snacks we brought would be helpful. Chips and popcorn were not ideal for being stranded. It'd be enough to survive, maybe, but we needed water. The ice and rainwater wouldn't last us forever. And pretty soon night fell on us, and we tried to sleep. My dream that night was absolutely trippy. It started with me having sex with Naomi in a room full of dream catchers. She put her fingers to my lips and whispered, "You have a chance at life." From there, I was fully clothed, walking to the casket of Emmett Till. I stared into his bruised, wet face. The image from high school history burned into my skull. His eyes opened and he reached out, and I woke up. But at this part, I knew I was still dreaming. I was in therapy talking about life, and a vinyl record player kept scratching. Music was trying to come out, but it wouldn't. And as I spoke to the psychiatrist, the office started to flood. Then I was back in Columbia, at my desk, with a math test on it, the professor looking at me, about to yell at me for being naked. And then that's when Pat woke me up, and he held the flare gun. He sat us down at the stern and faced us. He said, "We're stuck. We're in a bad spot, and if we're going to be honest, unless we work together, we won't last long. So I'm going to propose some ideas." The first idea: no cannibalism until one of us was dead. We had to have died first. The second idea: no one eats unless they have to. The third idea: every 4 hours, try to rest and keep watch for boats or planes. We all agreed. It seemed pretty basic, but as long as no one turned on each other, we could remain together. It all seemed like a fever dream, and I tried to go back to sleep, but I was too freaked out. The next morning, the sunset was red again, and it hurt my eyes to see it. I felt tired. Aaron was up shivering. I said, "What's the matter?" It was a dumb question, but I wanted to know exactly. And then Aaron told me. He said, "I promised myself I was going to end up dead before I was 40. I wanted to show that I could do it, but I can't. I should have stayed in San Pedro. I want to tell Jamie that I do want to marry her. I do." And about now, the shock was setting in. I sat next to him. I held him a little bit. By 9, Kyle and Pat were awake, and Kyle looked like shit. His skin was already showing signs of dehydration. Between the smoking and the beer, he was the worst off. We were all in bad shape. I had at least 4, and I know Pat had 6. Aaron, maybe 1, and Kyle easily had 10 beers. Of course, this was during the day. This time, a third shark came towards us. Same species as the others, but larger, easily 15 feet. It was wide. It hit the boat on the starboard. Not a curious nudge, but a severe hit. It knocked the yacht a couple of degrees in the opposite direction. We stared in shock as the shark circled around us, giving a nudge on our port side. Aaron screamed a prayer against the shark, begging Jesus to send it away. The shark came closer again. This time it circled a few times before the fin went under. Now I looked over to Pat. We didn't think that divine intervention played into what happened. We were hunted. Rationing the food became hard. Pat's phone died, the first one of ours to go. Well, technically the second because Aaron's was ruined when he went overboard. Kyle tossed his empty cigarette box and opened a fresh pack. At around 11, Pat passed out the water that we had left. But even that wasn't enough. If we kept like this, we wouldn't make it another 2 days. And then finally I spoke. We need to move inland. Maybe if we try east, it could work. Pat said, "Why east?" I said, "Well, think about it. We probably went west to come out this far. If we go east, we might be able to see some land or some kind of settlement." Kyle and Aaron voted to agree with me. Begrudgingly, Pat agreed. He fired up the engine and we went east, and hopefully the nightmare would have ended. Unfortunately, we had no such luck. For one, the sharks followed us. Second, the engine must have taken damage, as not long after we moved, it puttered out. And then anxiety fell upon us again. This time all the sharks made their presence known. The big one, I called it Bruce. He swam the closest. The other 2, Whitey and Hook, swam behind Bruce. And this time, it was Whitey and Hook who nudged the boat. Pat walked towards the bow with the flare gun and fired a shot at Bruce. He missed and it landed near the shark's gills. Bruce reacted in shock, hitting the bow, which knocked Pat down, but the shark swam away. Kyle was biting his nails. The nail his index finger on his left hand was much lower than a healthy fingernail should be. His finger must have been burning. I noticed that Pat was guarding the food more and more. He didn't trust us to go for it. And as night fell, the sharks returned again, like a parasite. This time it was only Whitey and Hook, but they were getting bolder, biting the stern. Aaron swung with the fishing rod, but to no avail. He was weak. After 2 strong swings, he realized that it was just absolutely futile. Kyle started jumping on the boat in an attempt to scare them off. After 3 strong jumps and a 4th weak one, they left. But Kyle was gaunt. Pat and Aaron weren't looking so great either. And while I wasn't going to waste whatever battery I had left to check myself in the camera, I knew I wasn't looking good. I could feel myself getting weaker. By 6, our last water was gone. We had to resort to drinking our piss. Each of us had a designated bottle, and throughout the night, we would try to piss. When we could, we would drink. Aaron refused, claiming he didn't need to go, and at this point, it was getting harder for all of us. By 8, we ate scraps. I looked at my barely healthy friends, and I felt myself eyeing up who would die first. Looking at your friends with the idea of cannibalizing them is never pleasant. I had to fight those urges. There was at least 1 knife on board, and at this state, it would be easy to slice one of their throats and dig in. but I couldn't. I wouldn't allow myself to. And as much as I love Naomi, my mom, dad, and brother, I could never do that. If it came to it, I would just off myself. Night fell and sleeping wasn't going to happen. Pat was scaring me as he hoarded the flare gun, plus a knife. He also held control over the food. If anyone had the potential to kill, it was him. I couldn't sleep, and if I did, it wasn't for very long. I woke up about 3 a.m. I saw someone leaned over the port side. Aaron, and he was taking massive gulps of seawater. I grabbed his shirt, yanked him up. He screamed and yelled, and I slapped him. I tried to burp him, to punch him in the stomach. I woke up Pat and Kyle. It was too late, though. The amount of seawater that Aaron drank had doomed him. But something far scarier was happening. We were sinking. The sharks were back again today, and again, they circled but didn't touch us. They just kinda stayed at the bow, and by nightfall, we would be mostly submerged. Thankfully, Juan Luis had an inflatable raft. It had a pump, and we all took turns pumping it. Except for Aaron, he was ranting about God, Moses, Satan, hell, you name it. Pat was getting angered by it, though. Kyle and I feared Pat at this time. As we saw the food was getting lower, we assumed it was Pat. The captain's area, or hole, or whatever, was covered in strange markings. Some were caveman-style drawings. Others were phrases. Bait, predator, east. Hunger was the drive, driven. At one point, when Pat was pumping, I peed into my bottle and I looked over to Kyle. "I think Pat's gone crazy," I whispered to him. He nodded his head in agreement. We were worried about what he might do, and Kyle suggested we just let him work through it. And while I was pumping, Pat walked up to the chanting Aaron. He yelled, "You stole fucking food." And Aaron responded, 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Then Pat said, "Fuck you." And I stopped pumping. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," Aaron replied. But before Kyle and I could do anything, Pat took out the knife and stabbed Aaron right in the stomach. The serrated edge cut through Aaron's dehydrated skin without much resistance. Blood dripped from the blade as Pat pulled sideways. The squishing sound which came from Aaron made my stomach churn. With a healthy couple of pulls, Aaron's intestines dropped to the ground. Slap. Aaron, still alive but unable to speak, looked over at us. His eyes were bloodshot. Complete fear taken over him. Kyle threw up instantly and I couldn't move. Pat removed the knife and plunged it into Aaron's skull. And Pat looked over to us. He looked back at Aaron's corpse, ogling his guts. And then I joined in Kyle with puking. The noises that Pat made while he cannibalized Aaron. The noises that Pat made while he cannibalized Aaron could never be recreated. He seemed to enjoy the rawness of it. Like an animal, he bit, tore. He licked the blood that he could. He only ate the organs. Kyle watched in complete horror, unable to move, and I said, "Fuck it." I focused on pumping up the inflatable, pushing through the burning on my arms and back. When Pat finished, he pushed what he could of the body into the ocean, and the sharks took it with them. With the raft nearly done and almost half the yacht underwater, I curled into the fetal position and waited. Pat was now sobbing, begging for mercy to God. But I couldn't shake that image of Aaron. All he wanted to do was to live, be happy, have a family. Now he was gone. What Pat did took away the human part of Aaron. He was just meat. meat on the deck. And Pat didn't have a soul, and I think he knew it. For the night, the sharks were happy. I woke up surprised that I couldn't sleep at all. The replay of Pat's monstrous action plagued my dreams. My back was wet, and the bow finally touched the water. The raft was ready. I heard banging and looked over, and Kyle was wrestling Pat, but Pat was winning. He was slamming Kyle's head onto the deck, grabbing his throat. I broke away to see that Bruce was the only one circling. I moved in. I pushed Pat as hard as I could, which was enough to knock him over. Kyle began punching him in the face. He grabbed Pat's head and slammed it into the deck, pushing into his eyes, and then I pulled Kyle away. Kyle looked at me. He's like, "Why?" And I told him, "Because we're still human." Pat looked at us with shame on his face. He took the knife, the one he used on Aaron, and handed it to Kyle. He reached into his pants and gave me the flare gun. Pat closed his eyes and, without another word, jumped into the ocean. Bruce opened his jaws, bit Pat's torso, and dragged him to the depths, blood flowing close behind him. Without Aaron and without Pat, we embarked on the raft and went away from the fishing yacht. We paddled when we could. We tried to drift back, but we were lost, out in the open. One bite from Bruce or even the other two sharks, and we were as good as dead. Kyle's phone had died and mine was close. I guess being stranded meant not needing social media. I looked at Kyle, and by this point, he was a skeleton. He was skinny when we first started this trip. He was dying. We both knew it but didn't say anything, and he began to cry. "It was me who ate that food. I killed him. I did this," Kyle said. I stared at him, too tired to respond. "I'm a bad person. I used others to get where I was, and I allowed others to take the fall. I have no excuse. I'm sorry," he said to me. He stood up. I was too. I was sorry to everyone. I was sorry to Aaron's family, who would never find their son, and if they did, he wouldn't look human. A son who was a victim of cannibalism. Shark bait. I'm sorry to Jamie, who wanted to marry Aaron so bad and will never be able to. The future kids they could have had that will never be. I'm sorry to Pat's family. They'll never find their son either. And if he survived, he would have been broken for killing his friend and for attacking another. And I'm sorry that Megan will live by herself, surviving her own loss. I'm sorry for Naomi that I wasn't better for her, that I allowed this to happen, that I didn't better prepare. And I'm sorry for Kyle too. Sure, he didn't always treat women the best, nor was he going to change the world in any significant manner. He wasn't bad. He wasn't evil. He was just lost as we are now. I looked at Kyle and I said, "Dude, you're not bad. We all make mistakes. This isn't your fault." Kyle put his cigarettes in the middle of the raft. "Light one for me, will you?" he asked me. I did. He puffed it. "You never smoked," he said. I nodded. "It's bad for you." He laughed and he coughed. His hand dragged in the water. We sat in silence. He enjoyed his cigarette, and I lay there looking at the sun. It was beating down on us, going on 6 days. The sun dried our skin out, burned our skin. A fin broke the surface. It was Hook, and Whitey was not too far behind. Those bastard sharks never did leave us alone, did they? No. Should we tell them that we don't taste good? I don't think they care. Guess not. "Do me a favor. Don't let them get me," Kyle said. He moved his hand into the raft. "Of course not, Kyle." "Good." The cigarette dangled from Kyle's mouth as he spoke. "Growing up, I used to love sharks," Kyle stated. You ever think you'd die by them? Nah, I didn't even think they'd get me. Good luck. Thanks. It took a moment to realize that Kyle died just as the sharks appeared. I moved his hand away from the ocean. The cigarette that dangled blew into the water. The big fin of Bruce appeared. I reached into Kyle's pocket and grabbed his lighter. I grabbed the damp cigarette box and took one out, and I lit it. The sharks are gaining. My phone is dying, and I don't know if I'll live to see the outcome. Hell, I don't know if the story will even survive. And if it does, Mom, Dad, I tried. I'm sorry, Naomi, I love you. You'll be okay. Scott, take care of yourself, little man. I hope you remember me. I'm sorry to Pat's family. I'm sorry to Megan. I'm sorry to Aaron's family. I'm sorry, Jamie. And I'm sorry to Kyle's grandparents. He was a good kid.
This story might not be over yet, because once you've heard it, once you've known, the curse may have already started following you. Be careful tonight and never turn your back on the whispers. If you want to keep exploring forgotten horrors and twisted tales, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any shadows hiding in the dark. Because sometimes what you hear is only the surface. What's truly terrifying is still waiting behind subscribe before it's too late.